It's time for the Your Personal Bank Show with Ferenc Toth. In an era of chaos, confusion, and craziness, Ferenc is a voice for common sense. As a financial literacy educator, speaker, and entrepreneur, Ferenc cuts through the noise to help us understand how current events affect our money, economy, and our freedom. Now, here's Ferenc Toth.
Welcome to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ferenc. Recently, everyone is talking about the tariffs because the reciprocal tariffs went into effect April 2nd of 2025. And to be frank, when I first heard about this, I was somewhat concerned about raising tariffs also, because that can potentially, certainly, increase the prices of goods. The more I learn about the Trump tariff policy, the more I'm in favor of it. You see, their policy is all about fair trade instead of free trade. And it's about trade and access to other markets. And when I learned that reciprocal tariffs will be calculated both on the monetary and non-monetary totals, I found that very interesting. Also, the U.S. is going to tariff the other countries about half of what they charge us. And I agree, that should be absolutely more than fair. If we were to tariff them at the levels that they tariff us, it would be catastrophic, frankly, for a lot of their economies. And when it comes to tariff policy, our allies, our friends, are often worse than the countries that are less friendly to us. For example, with automobiles, the U.S. charges 2.5% tariff on autos that come into our country, while the EU, the European Union, charges 10% on U.S. autos, plus a 20% VAT tax or value add tax on U.S. autos that go into the European Union markets. And when you consider the protections and tariffs that go into place, it really closes those markets to U.S. manufacturers. For example, in South Korea, another ally of ours, 81% of the cars that are owned by South Koreans are built in South Korea. Japan, that percentage happens to be 94%. And Japan plays a especially interesting game where they do not actually tariff U.S. autos. So they can say that there's no tariff on U.S. built automobiles that go into Japan, but they have rules where you cannot sell a U.S. produced automobile in Japan. In fact, there's no U.S. auto dealers in Japan. So although there's no tariffs, their rules disallow U.S. made automobiles to be sold in that country. And that's why 94% of Japanese own Japanese-built automobiles, while at the same time, Toyota sells about 1 million cars in the U.S. annually. And again, the U.S. auto sold in Japan is essentially zero. Motorcycles. The U.S. charges 2.4% tariff. Thailand, 60%. India, 70% on U.S.-made motorcycles. Grossly unfair. But probably the one that takes the cake is Canada. I've shared this before. They charge between 250 to 300% tariffs on dairy products, for example. Canada plays a bit of a game also, much like Japan with their autos. Canada only charges a 2 or 3% tariff on, say, the first gallon of milk. But then at an individual producer to sell more and greater quantities of dairy products into Canada has an increasing tariff policy. And it rapidly increases to 250 to upwards of 300% as the volume of dairy products by that producer are sold in that country. So when asked, Canada can say, well, we only charge a 2 or 3% tariff on dairy products, but again, it's only on the first gallon. So it's a sleight of hand. Just like Japan can say, well, we don't tariff U.S. made cars. They don't, but they have rules that you cannot sell a U.S. made car in Japan. There's no U.S. dealerships, for example. And it goes on. The EU, the European Union, bans most U.S. poultry of all kinds. Australia bans U.S. beef, while the U.S. imported about 3 billion of Australian beef just in 2024 alone. And this one, I think, takes the cake. Japan charges a 700% tariff on U.S. produced rice. They're protecting their own rice industry, obviously. Now, ironically, many of these countries, particularly Japan and the European Union, the U.S. protects those countries militarily. So we're paying for their military protection, and Canada to an unofficial degree, we're paying for the military protection of those countries, yet their trade policies do not allow our U.S. producers, our companies, to sell products into their markets. And some people argue, well, we don't really protect Canada. But does anyone realistically think that if a hostile country were to come in and invade Canada, for example, do you think the U.S. would just set aside and allow a belligerent country to be right next door to us? Of course not. No rational person believes that. And Canada understands that too. And frankly, through their trade policy, have been taking advantage of the situation. Now, Canadians are great people, and so are many Europeans and the people are great, Australians, etc. But their leaders have negotiated these strong tariffs to protect their industries, even outright ban, in some cases, our industries from going into their countries while selling into ours. Now, we're the number one market in the world. We're the number one purchaser of goods in the world. We're the largest economy in the world. We're the buyers. We have all the power in this situation. In other words, they need us far more than we need them. Yet our leaders have been allowing for decades. This isn't political, it's both parties, presidents and etc. have allowed this to occur now for over 30 years. A lot of this tariff policy started really going into effect in the 1990s and has gotten worse steadily. It's like this: being the largest purchaser of the world has given us no benefit, or we've not taken advantage of that benefit. Individual households and businesses understand if you go to Costco or Sam's Club and you buy in bulk, you get a discount. Well, the U.S. buys in bulk. We're the largest purchaser in the world, yet we get no discount. In fact, in most cases, we're paying far more. We're buying more and paying more. It makes no logical sense. But as bad as tariffs are, some of the non-tariff barriers are worse. And the reciprocal tariffs are going to be calculated on both the monetary and non-monetary totals. What are some of the non-tariff barriers? Well, currency manipulation. A country reducing their value of their currency, China, for example, is very famous for that, makes their goods cheaper for us to purchase. It's an unfair advantage against producers in our country. There's VAT taxes or value add taxes that also make it more difficult to sell product into another country. There's export subsidies, counterfeit products. We all know there's cheap products that come in from all over the world. Frankly, China is famous for much of that. There's technology theft. And there's a lot of subsidized dumping of product into our country, where a country will subsidize their producers. Canada, for example, subsidizes their farmers, and then they sell the cheap product into the United States, thereby making it more difficult for U.S. farmers to produce or make a living. And the purpose is to destroy that industry, to dominate that industry. China is very famous for subsidizing cheap steel, for example, and dumping it into our markets, thereby making our steel manufacturers at a huge disadvantage to try to compete. And the purpose behind it is to try to put our steel manufacturing industry out of business so they can dominate that market. It's that simple. Free trade has been used against us to destroy our manufacturing capacity. They compete unfairly to kill our industries. It's really no different than some years ago, Walmart was famous for going into small towns and for the first 2 years would sell products at a significant discount so that they could knock out the competition, like the local hardware store or whatever in that particular smaller town. Then after a couple of years, many of those local businesses would go out of business because they couldn't compete. And then Walmart was the only real store left standing in many cases, and now they could dominate the market, and the prices went back up, and oftentimes even higher than they would have been before because there was no competition. There's nowhere else for purchasers, consumers to go unless they want to make a long drive, for example. And when free trade policies are used to destroy manufacturing capacity, well, we lose jobs, and in many cases, good paying jobs. the steel industry, shipbuilding, for example, all types of different industries, the automotive industry, historically had high numbers of good paying jobs for people that didn't necessarily need an advanced degree to earn a good living. It was common in the United States some decades ago for a family to live on one income, have a decent middle class living, buy a house, a car, go on some vacations, and have a decent retirement. That has all disappeared as a result of much of this, or much of it has disappeared, I should say. But also, it's a national security issue. Do you know that there is one single Chinese shipbuilding yard has more shipbuilding capacity than the entire U.S. shipbuilding industry currently? And China has multiple shipyards. We won World War II primarily because of our manufacturing capacity. We beat Germany and Japan on both sides of the globe at the same time. Would our country be able to do that again today? We have a phenomenal military still, but would we be able to accomplish something like that today? With our decimated manufacturing capacity, it's highly doubtful. I'm going to get into this and some more things about tariffs and fair trade that I think that'll dispel some of the myths that the media in particular, the legacy media in particular, have been spewing out there. So I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ference. For more information, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ference. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you can reach me. It's yourpersonalbank.com. So everybody's talking about tariffs. And as I stated in the first segment, when I first heard about it, I had some hesitancy, some concerns, because a tariff war can certainly cause the price of goods and services to increase. But when you look further into the Trump tariff policy and what they're trying to accomplish and how they're going about it, the more I learn, the more I'm in favor. As I was stating earlier, the free trade policies that our country has pursued over the last 3 or 4 decades have been used against us often to destroy our own manufacturing capacity. There's a lot of reasons behind this, but we lose jobs, and it's a national security issue. For example, in 2024 alone, the United States lost over 100,000 manufacturing jobs. The trade deficit also reached a all-time record of $1.2 trillion. That's wealth that's going out of this country, not coming in. NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, was passed in 1993. The purpose was to create a free trade zone between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada. But since that time, the United States has lost over 90,000 factories that have actually closed. Over 5 million manufacturing jobs have been lost. Over 19 trillion of trade deficit total has gone out of the country. Now, trade deficit, again, is money going out of the country, not coming in. It was a terrible trade deal for the United States. As I stated before, free trade policies have been used against us to destroy our manufacturing capacity. Open borders has further exacerbated good-paying jobs because more people, a larger labor force, drives wages down. If you look at charts since the early 1990s, the lower half of Americans' income has barely risen at all in the last 35 years. The one exception to that period happened to be Trump's first term. That was the only exception. And Trump, in his first term, if you remember, did raise tariffs. The mainstream media, Democrats, establishment DC, Wall Street all screamed and yelled about there would be inflation, there would be prices of goods would go up, and all these types of things, yet the opposite happened. Wages went up for nearly everyone. Inflation was non existent. The government brought in record revenues from tariff policy they had not seen in nearly 100 years. And even the Biden administration, who previously had roundly criticized many of the tariffs, particularly on China, kept them in place from Trump's first term, even through the Biden administration, because they were so lucrative. The one thing the government loves is more money. It was so lucrative, they couldn't afford to stop it. So even though they complained about it and made a lot of noise that this was so terrible, which we're hearing much of again, they kept it in place because it was so effective. And this time Trump is going big in terms of the tariff policy, both monetary and non-monetary, to create more fair trade. And this is going to accomplish a lot of things for our country in a positive way. And I think he's been extremely fair about it. When I learned the U.S. is only going to charge the other country about half of what they're charging us. So if they charge 100% tariff on a certain item, we're going to charge them 50. Where previously we were likely not charging them little or anything. So that's going to certainly benefit us, but bring things a little bit more fair at least. And how can anyone really argue with the fact that if you're charging us 100% tariff and we're only charging you 50, how can you be upset about that? Now, of course, many of these countries are going to scream in bloody murder. They've been used to, for decades, charging us whatever, 50, 100% tariffs or more, and us charging them little or nothing, so they're not used to it. I understand that. But you and I need to understand that we're still giving them a big break. When I first heard about reciprocal tariffs, I thought it was quite fair. I thought we were going to charge them the same. The fact that they've decided to go to half, that's, again, more than fair. Now, all of this is our own fault. The last 30 plus years, free trade advocates have influenced policy and presidents. But look at nearly any small town or rural area in America. Most of them are a hollow shell of what they once were. For most small towns, there's few jobs available or opportunities for that matter. It's not like you could start a business and create something because the whole area is depressed. In fact, most are depressed and quite run down. It's sad to see. I've done a lot of traveling in the last 3 years because my show has expanded and gone nationally. I'm blessed that way, and taken the family with RV and traveled the country and seen a lot of places. And yes, it's a beautiful country and it's full of a lot of great people, but a lot of the places we've gone through and seen are really sad, frankly depressing. And if you really want to see some of it firsthand, go to southern West Virginia. It's so depressing, the people. It's like if you remember those Charlie Brown commercials where he had the black cloud over his head? It's kind of like that. I mean, I'm not the most sensitive person out there. My wife is much more so about the feelings of other people. It's kind of overwhelming. And there's some beautiful towns that, again, were amazing some decades ago. Some of them were some of the richest towns in America or close to it at one point. And again, they're a shell of themselves. It's beautiful history to see, things like that. But it's sad at the same time. But it's not just West Virginia. In fact, you can see it in nearly every state in America. Get away from the big city, go out to the rural areas. Now, there's some small towns and areas that have done all right. They've thrived. Maybe great examples, Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. There's a small town that's thriving, but they're riding the notoriety of being a major, Civil War battle site. And so they have a lot of tourism, a lot of visitors. So they're able to manage to survive because of that. Other small towns have developed lots of festivals or, all types of different things that they do to try to attract people to their area for economic reasons. And really, economic reasons are a lot to do with the whole life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, aren't they? Just like it was in the Declaration. Yet, frankly, the trade policies, the free trade policies that have been unfairly used against us, against our country, have sadly left about half of Americans behind. And so those people that say, oh, this is going to be a disaster and all that kind of stuff, well, I'm sorry, give me a break. You've lost nearly 100,000 factories in the last, since NAFTA took effect. You've lost 5 million plus jobs and created a $19 trillion trade deficit. Part of the reason why we have so much debt. I'm sorry, but your policies have failed, so you should just sit down and shut up, in my opinion, and allow something different and see if this works better. We tried that. It hasn't worked, has it? Not too well. Well, for some people it has, but for a lot of people it hasn't. And you wonder why. You see that people question why they see the rise of populists like Trump and stuff, and you wonder why people are so frustrated. Again, go to most any small town in America, any rural area in America. Yes, they're great people. Yes, they're beautiful areas many times, but it really is sad and depressed. I mean, there's a reason why we call an entire region of the country the Rust Belt. You all know what I'm talking about. It's not called the Rust Belt because it's thriving. It's called the Rust Belt because it's rusting and dying, and it's been dying for decades. And it used to be a manufacturing hub of the country. And this whole situation hasn't, again, happened overnight. And it's not the fault of one party or the other, because both parties and presidents of both sides have been in power over the last 30 to 40 years. It's been this idea that free trade pursued at all costs will create more democracy in these other countries. Well, I'm sorry, I don't know about you, but China's still communist. Nixon started it with Kissinger and all that. If you go back to your history, Nixon was kind of the one that opened that market back in the early 70s. They were communists then, there's communists today. Did that work? The free trade policies at all costs have shown significant levels of failure. And a country that doesn't produce much really is not a strong country economically. And as I've stated earlier, it's also a national security issue. The U.S. doesn't produce enough antibiotics to treat its own citizens. We have to rely on China. Are they our best friend? Frankly, they're our largest competitor, aren't they, in the world? I've stated this before. One Chinese shipyard produces more ships, has more shipbuilding capacity than the entire U.S. shipbuilding industry, and that's something we as the U.S. used to dominate. We used to dominate electronics. Nearly every computer, electronics, TVs, you name it, are built elsewhere. Chips, one of the most, especially the high-end chips, mostly are built in Taiwan. We have limited chip building manufacturing capacity. There's been a few steps to try to address some of that because it's become such a dire national security issue. But high-end chips, sophisticated chips, should be built here. And guess what, folks? That's a whole bunch of high-paying jobs too, isn't it? So is building ships or automobiles or producing antibiotics for that matter. And there's a lot of factories in this country that are underutilized or sitting empty. They could be remodeled or geared up. Look, if these companies want to avoid the tariffs, there's a very simple solution. They can just manufacture it in the United States. They avoid the whole tariff thing, don't they? Solves the problem, creates more. We start building stuff here again. More jobs come about, more opportunities for people across the country. And by the way, folks, it'd be great for the economy across the board if we go back to building stuff again. Will this occur overnight? No, this is a longer term plan. Probably going to take a while. I've stated, I think a year or two. Could be longer. We'll start seeing some benefits quickly. Others will take longer. But continuing down the same path, frankly, is just not an option economically for our country. And I'll be sharing some things that you can do to protect yourself from the volatility and uncertainty of the transition that even Trump himself has admitted is going to happen. I'm going to encourage you to stay tuned in the next segment. I'll be sharing some more of those things, so don't miss it.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ference. For more information, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. This is Ference. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. Yes, you will reach me. And yeah, I know people get really surprised when I reach out to them. Again, I think it's funny because I'll call somebody back after they contact me and they're like, wow, I know you said that. I heard it on the radio, but yeah, you really do. Yes, I really do get back with folks if they reach out to me. I get busy sometimes. It might take me a day or so, but I do my best to get with folks, and I will reach out to you if you want more information. I can share with you how to reduce taxes, increase your liquidity, create positive arbitrage, reduce market risk, help you navigate this transition period that we're clearly going into as economy. Again, we're going to have some challenges in the shorter term. I'd say next year or two, but I'm excited about the longer term. And that's one of the things we're hearing, like in the legacy media and other people are saying, Americans can't afford tariffs. Well, part of the reason they're saying that is they don't fully understand the whole policy and what's going on behind it and what's trying to be accomplished by, for example, bringing more manufacturing to the United States. A simple solution: hey, just build it here if you don't want to pay tariffs. But because of the high levels of inflation we've experienced, particularly in the last few years, they're concerned about that. Yet what caused all that? What I say is this: the average American can't afford the government to continue to spend more than it receives, because that's the primary cause of inflation. The average American can't afford more inflation. That's a bigger deal. The average American can't afford more open borders. That drives wages lower. We've seen that and experienced that. The wage growth for the bottom 50% of income earners in the United States has barely changed since the early 90s. The cost of inflation in those 35 years has more than doubled, probably tripled. I'd have to look at it closely, but significantly higher. So the cost of everything's gone up significantly since the 90s, yet the average income has not for the bottom 50%. And folks, that's half the country. They're our fellow Americans. We should care about that. Again, go to any small town, most any small town in America, anywhere in the country, rural areas, whatever, you'll find a depressed economic situation. Few opportunities, few jobs available, few business opportunities available. It's sad. It really is. It's sad. You see towns, beautiful towns with beautiful buildings and things like this, where they've attempted restoration efforts in many places, but frankly, they're just a hollow shell of what they used to be, even just a few decades ago. If a company came into one of those smaller towns or regional areas and started building something, offering jobs, guess what? Opportunity would come with it. Economic prosperity would come with it. Businesses would get started because there'd be people working, making money, and they would need services, for example, in those areas. It's part of the whole life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Economic prosperity is part of having a good life, and to just ignore half the country is heartless. Here's the other thing that free trade has done. Free trade at all costs, that is. The United States has created a monster with China. They've become the second largest economy in the world. They're also become our biggest competitor, economically, militarily, etc. They dump cheap products on us, steal our technology, create the fentanyl that has been killed hundreds of thousands of Americans. None of this can be denied. The U.S. can no longer afford to surrender economically. We cannot pursue free trade at all costs, allow other countries to tariff us at tremendous levels or shut down their markets altogether while we provide little or no barriers to their products and their industries selling into our country. Again, we're the largest purchaser of goods in the world. There isn't a country that can afford a full-blown trade war with the United States. They need us far more than we need them. And so the people that are fear-mongering about a trade war and the prices of things going up, my opinion is going to be fairly short-lived. They're going to learn their lesson quite quickly. In fact, Canada has probably been playing the biggest game of chicken recently, has started to already come around to, hey, Trump is serious. and they're starting to discuss reducing their tariffs. And they're some of the worst tariffs on us. I've shared this before, 2 to 300% tariffs on dairy products and chicken and things like that. And they're supposed to be our friends, our allies. Gosh, they're our neighbors. We probably have more in common with Canada than any other country in the world. Yet they've been taking tremendous advantage of us economically because we allowed them to. Again, it's really our fault. I think what's happened is they probably said, well, let's tariff them at this level and see what happens. And we didn't respond. And they raised it and we didn't respond. And they raised it and we didn't respond. They kept pushing the envelope to see where they could go, like a kid would do, right? And we never responded. Finally, we have a person in charge, a president who gets it, who understands this. And hey, like Trump or not, but he was talking about, he wrote a book, I believe, in 1987, discussing these very issues about tariffs and unfair trade. I remember seeing interviews with him on Letterman in the 90s saying the same thing. Trump has been consistent on this message for nearly 40 years, and he's finally in the position to really do something about it. Mexico has announced they won't fight the U.S. on tariffs. Vietnam has reduced tariffs already. Israel has eliminated all tariffs on U.S. goods already. Expect to see more of that as these things go into effect, because if these countries do not reduce their tariffs, it's going to devastate their economies far more than ours. Again, I've used Canada as an example, and I guess again, Canada bothers me the most because they're supposed to be our closest ally and neighbor, certainly our closest neighbor, again, having the most in common with them. And I think the Canadian people are great. Every Canadian I've ever met, they've been the nicest. They've been great folks, but their leaders have just raked us over the coals. When I learned that almost 300% tariffs on dairy, I was blown away. I guess I feel taken advantage of. Maybe it irritates me, and I'm a financial guy, so I feel like they're ripping us off. How's that? They saw a weakness and they took advantage of it. And I'm sorry, that frustrates me. I understand why they did it, and I'm frustrated even more though, I guess, because we had leadership that wouldn't do anything about it. And this free trade group had so much influence over our leadership that nothing was ever done. Or sadly, probably many of them benefited from this. I can't prove all of that, of course, but it just makes logical sense. Now, Wall Street has been nervous because they don't really know what to think about all this. And one thing Wall Street doesn't like is uncertainty. They just don't know what to think. I mean, there hasn't been an increase in tariffs like this or really significant change in economic trade policy since World War II. So nobody was really hardly alive to experience this, so they don't know what to think. And that's why you see like surveys from Fortune talking about Americans haven't felt this dejected about their income and business prospects in over a decade. And the article goes on stating consumer confidence fell for the fourth consecutive month. And their outlook on business conditions and own income fell to the lowest levels in 12 years. They did also go on and state that this low confidence level, which is well below the threshold, usually signals a recession ahead. Recessions oftentimes are self-fulfilling prophecy. It really is an expectation of what people think is going to happen. And sometimes, if enough people think it, that's what ends up happening. Do I believe there's a good chance that we're going to go into recession this year? Absolutely. Reasons behind it certainly are earnings are decreasing and the tariff policies are going to be chaotic. But understand that chaos is not being caused by the Trump administration, despite what the legacy media wants to tell us. They've been very clear about what they're doing. And again, they're only charging half on the reciprocal tariffs of what the other countries are charging us. I think any person would consider that more than fair. The chaos and uncertainty really comes about these other countries and how they're going to react. A lot of it is emotional. They've been able to take advantage of our markets while blocking entry into their markets, essentially, for decades. And that's going away. They're going to have to adjust. And some of them are throwing a fit, like a small child would. But they'll come around soon enough because their economic situation, as it starts to tank, if they don't make changes, which it will, particularly the countries that sell a lot of products to us, they'll adjust. They'll have to. They'll be forced to far quicker than we would. Canada is a great example of about 1 to 2% of our production of what we produce, we sell to Canada. Approximately 25% of their economy is sold in the United States. Which one's going to last longer in that type of situation, a high tariff situation? See, who's going to benefit from lower tariffs more than anyone in that? It's going to be Canada, more than the United States even. But the fact is, if we move to a 50% tariff, half of what they charge us, versus what we were at were little or no tariffs, well, that would also be a benefit for us. So again, it's going to be a benefit both ways economically. And then when I read on about this consumer confidence thing, it's interesting because it discussed how the consumer confidence really was about short term, and they went on to explain it. It's about the short term, what people think is going to happen over the next few months on the economy and their income and things like that. And also the pessimism, as they stated in this Fortune magazine article, the pessimism extended to the stock market. As they stated, their expectations have turned negative for the first time since 2023. And they're expecting a massive sell-off. Will there be a transition period? Will there be volatility? Is there uncertainty? All of those answers are yes. Should you protect yourself? Of course you should. One way is to reduce market risk. Your personal bank's a great solution to that. So are annuities. So are guaranteed lifetime income riders. Some of the best numbers we've seen on all of those in over 40 years. It's the golden era of fixed assets. You can do something about this. You don't have to just ride the pessimism. You don't have to ride the roller coaster down and then wait for it to come back up, which could take some time. Historically, the last two cycles where we saw recessions, we saw, depending on what you were invested in, anywhere from 5 to 15-year recovery period. That's not uncommon. You can avoid that, or at least reduce your exposure to that by guaranteeing some of your assets. Your personal bank, annuities, guaranteed income riders, all can accomplish that. And if you want more information, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. I'll be happy to share with you how you can protect yourself and thrive through this transition period that just has to occur because of changing decades, literally changing decades of economic policy. But in the long run, I believe it's good and be necessary, but we got to go through the process, don't we? Stay tuned in the last segment. I got a few more things to share I think you'll find interesting, so don't miss it.
Stay tuned for more common sense from Ference. For more information, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show with Ference Toth. Want more information? Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. Now back to the show with Ference Toth.
Welcome back to the Your Personal Bank Show. If you want to reach me, you can do so at yourpersonalbank.com. And yes, you will reach me, Ference, at yourpersonalbank.com. So I like this other article from Fortune where it stated BlackRock CEO Larry Fink says almost everyone he talks to is more anxious about the economy than at any time in recent memory. Again, Wall Street really doesn't know what to make of the Trump tariff policies, the economic policies. It's a big change. There's no question about it. If you've been listening to this show, you know I was hesitant when I first heard about it myself. But as I dug into it further, and I think that's what some of these people need to do, I think they're looking at it just from a surface standpoint. They think, oh, higher tariffs, oh, that's bad. We've been taught, for so long that tariffs were bad, free trade was good. But when you really dive into it, a lot of bad stuff has come from free tariffs, and it's been abused. To be fair, it's been abused to attack our manufacturing capacity. Why would other countries do that? Well, by China dumping cheap steel into the United States, which has been doing a lot of, is a negative impact on our steel industry. Well, why would they do that? Well, they want to dominate the steel industry. Hopefully kill ours off. national security issues. If China dominates steel and the U.S. barely produces any, none if any, and we get into a national security issue, they have a tremendous leg up on us. If we can't produce our own steel, we can't build what we need to do to defend ourselves. We become a weaker country. And unfortunately, a lot of this free trade policy, although it sounded great on the surface, the end result of it has been devastating in a negative way to the U.S. economy, and devastating for about half of the Americans who've lost opportunities of jobs and businesses in small towns and rural areas across the country. Like I said, Wall Street is nervous. They're not sure what to think. And even Trump himself has stated there'll be a transition period. There's going to be a period of volatility. You should protect yourself, reduce your market risk, guarantee some of your portfolio. Your personal bank's a great tool for that. Plus, it's highly liquid. You can re-engage after a correction. If we do indeed go into a recession, which more and more people seem to think that's going to happen, it's more and more likely. Well, why not protect a portion of your portfolio rather than ride the roller coaster down and having to come back, wait for it to come back up? Why not get off the ride? Or at least some of the money get off the ride. And then if it does do that correction, frankly, you'll be able to rebuy, re-engage when the assets are cheaper. That's what Warren Buffett's doing. He did it before, did it in 2007. He made out really well buying back in when he did. Since then, much of the institutional money, the hedge funds, had record selling in early March, reducing their risk to equities, stocks, things like that. Why not follow the big boys, the smart money? Hanging in there may not be the best solution, and waiting. I know that's the advice we all hear, and that's the common mantra. But if you think that the markets are going to be weak or even go down for the next foreseeable future, the next, say, year or two maybe, why not get off the ride? Give yourself opportunity to take advantage of that correction. We are in a major transition period. The current administration is upending decades of economic status quo and trade policy. We just don't know how the other countries are going to respond and adjust. That's where the uncertainty comes from. How are they going to respond? Are they going to lower their tariffs? Or are they going to hang in there out of pride or stubbornness or whatever and try to fight this? Eventually they're going to lose because we dominate economically purchasing power just about everyone. When the dust settles, we'll have far more fair trade rather than free trade, which will be, again, much more fair. We've already seen over $3 trillion of economic impact promised over the next 4 years regarding manufacturing. So we're going to see tremendous increases in manufacturing and manufacturing jobs in the next few years. Some of it will ramp up quicker because there's a lot of plants out there that are operating at less than full capacity. So it'll be fairly easy for a company to ramp their production up. In fact, it's already been reported many companies that still have factories in the United States are super excited because most of those are not operating even close to capacity. They'll be able to ramp up fairly quickly. Others will have to find abandoned or unused factories or locations, or may even have to build new, which will take longer, but again, creates more economic opportunity for contractors and all that kind of stuff in this country. A good example is a lot of the automobile parts are made in Canada, and many companies already announced, or foreign companies are going to bring the parts manufacturing back to the United States so the car can be built in the U.S. primarily to avoid the tariffs. It increases good-paying jobs, boosts our economy, and we're going to see in some parts of the country, a lot of particularly small towns, rural areas, where some manufacturing comes back, you're going to see economic booms like we haven't seen in decades. And this is all important for national security. We need to be able to produce our own medicine, our own chips, our own whatever is necessary. We don't need to be in a position where we're relying on other countries, some who are not necessarily our best friends. And there's this the tariff policy is the one everybody focuses on, but that's not the entire Trump administration economic policy. They also are focused on reducing government spending, which is what's the primary cause of inflation. This will bring inflation down. I think Trump will probably be fairly successful at that. He had a very low inflation in his first term. I believe he's going to accomplish the same thing in his second term. Egg prices have already come down over half. Fuel prices, I noticed that from traveling, have come down significantly from just even a few months ago. Drill baby drill is working. And the spending that our government has done has exploded. The debt and deficit are absolutely unsustainable. And if they were allowed to continue, the U.S. would go bankrupt. We have to change direction on this. Otherwise, we are dealing with economic chaos. So I'm so glad to see addressing the deficit is being attacked and discussed seriously. Eliminating waste and fraud and theft will help reduce that spending also. We're in financial trouble. We have to change. We can't afford, again, some people saying we can't afford tariffs. No, we cannot afford not to do tariffs. We have to change direction. This is a turnaround. Think of the U.S. government, our country, as a company that's gotten themselves into financial trouble. And they have to bring in a turnaround CEO to change it. And that's what Trump is. He's that person that's willing to make the tough decisions, not the political ones, maybe not always the most popular decision, but the one that needs to be made, the tough decision to make a difference, not just for the shorter term, but the long term. Because the long-term future is what really counts. Turnarounds are challenging. Cuts have to happen. It can be ugly, but it's necessary. But the bottom line is, if the current administration is successful, and I have every reason to believe that they're going to have largely be successful in this effort, the long-term benefits, folks, I can't wait to see what it's going to look like in a year or two or 4 or 5 years from now, where we've got manufacturing has doubled and tripled and quadrupled from where it was at the low. And you start seeing small towns around America start people moving back into those areas because there's jobs available or there's business opportunities to service the people that are coming into that community. And watching some of these historical, beautiful old towns, small town America, rise again. I love small town America. I grew up on one myself. I experienced this firsthand. I remember seeing my small town in Missouri that I grew up in, just outside of Kansas City, in fact, kind of wither. And I remember going back decades later, and it's barely changed. The people are great, but the town is just still barely hanging on. And there's thousands and thousands of those towns like that across this country. It would do my heart good to see them starting to grow again, starting to do things again, have some economic prosperity, some reason to be hopeful. You know, if you don't have hope, you don't have anything. And then you just have sadness and despair. And some people say, well, just move and leave and go somewhere else. Well, the price of housing the way it's gone, and particularly in many of the larger cities, economically, that's just out of the question for many of these people that are stuck in these small towns. Yes, they can live inexpensively, and they may not have much income, but at least they can get by. They don't have the financial economic wherewithal to go move to a larger city, nor is it something they even want to do. Someone isn't going to be happy and successful if they're pursuing something that they absolutely do not like or they hate. They're never going to be successful at it, not long term. You might be able to make some money, but is that a way to live? And money isn't everything. I'm a financial guy. I talk about this all the time. Successful people spend 80% of their time doing what they're really good at and what they love. And what if what you love is living in the small town you grew up in or you moved to and you love that place and you have your relationships or your family there or whatever it may be? But wouldn't it be great to see some economic prosperity come back to your hometown? That's all people want. They want opportunity. They're not asking for a handout, just an opportunity and a hope for a better future. That's really all anyone ever wants. And it's exciting to see an administration addressing issues that haven't been dealt with and, frankly, just been totally ignored or exacerbated for decades. But I'll leave you with this. Again, there's going to be that transition period. It's probably going to last a while. It's probably going to last a year or two. You don't turn a huge economic ship like this around on a dime. You want to protect yourself. There's going to be volatility. There's going to be uncertainty. Likely going to be wild market swings, as even Wall Street themselves. They really don't know what to think. Your personal bank is guaranteed, insured, income tax free, and highly liquid. You could park some money there, make a decent return on it, and then when opportunity presents itself from a correction or whatever, you could pounce on that and really make out. If you just want to get in a situation where you can grow without downside market risk, annuities are a great solution. Best numbers we've seen in 40 years. Same thing with your personal banks, by the way. And if you just want to create a pension and make sure you have income guaranteed the rest of your life, again, best numbers we've seen in over 40 years. We have guaranteed income riders that'll pay you up to a 30% signing bonus, for example. That'll increase your income guaranteed for life by 30% right there over what it would have been right now. We have other ones that'll increase if you defer the income, it'll increase up to 10% per year. Well, for a lot of people who have IRAs, 401ks, retirement accounts, isn't that the purpose of that account? To create supplement income? To create retirement income? Well, if you can increase your income by 9-10% a year, guaranteed, and defer it for 5 or 10 years, you're literally going to have a whole lot more income. If you leave it in a market or at risk or something else, are you going to get those kinds of returns? The answer is maybe. What about locking some of it down, making it guaranteed? It only makes sense. If you want more information, contact me at yourpersonalbank.com. Stay tuned next week to the Your Personal Bank shows for some more great information. And as long as it's on our money, in God we trust.
Listen Tuesdays at noon and Saturdays at 1 to the Your Personal Bank show for more information. Contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. That's 866-268-4422. This show is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information. The presenter and guests of this program do not engage in legal, accounting, or tax advice. Professional advice regarding your situation should be sought if required. Some products discussed may have limitations and not be available in all states. Excessive unpaid loans may affect performance. Distributions may become taxable if not managed properly. Replacements may not be suitable for everyone. There may be charges when replacing coverage. Dividend rates and bank line of credit rates may change. For current rates, contact Ference at 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com. Again, that's 866-268-4422 or yourpersonalbank.com.